What is up, guys? Skyler here. Today we are doing the American Revolution Part 1 by OverSimplified. If you guys want to see Part 2, 150 likes and we'll do it. You guys killed it very easily with World War II. It's not a very hard goal to hit, but it's a goal nonetheless. Let's just get straight into it. Drop a sub if you're new here.
Holy
We've done
smokes.
World War II, so check
Columbus,
that out.
That is no way to address the king and queen of Spain. What is wrong with you? Okay, so you
The
know how we're
homie
looking for a new
Columbus.
trade route to India, right? Right. And the earth is round, right? Right. So I'm thinking we can just sail the other way around the planet, right? Yeah. So I set sail, right?
Very
And I
inefficient.
reach
Very
India,
possible,
right?
but
Wrong.
inefficient.
Wrong. I did not reach India. I did not. All right. No. All right. Get to the point. Did you know there's a whole nother freaking continent out there? Okay, and you think I should care about this? Why? Oh, I'm sorry. Did I forget to mention there's gold everywhere? Gold?
And the reason why he's saying there's gold everywhere is when Christopher Columbus landed there, he stumbled upon many natives, and the natives had gold necklaces, gold bands, gold ear. They had a ton of just gold crap, and it was like astonishing for him to see, and it made it look like the whole place is covered in gold. And what's interesting is he actually kind of befriended some of the native tribes and got them to show him the gold areas and things, a place where there was actually gold. But that wasn't just all the natives there. He actually fought a ton too. Some of the native tribes didn't like the colonists at all, or Christopher Columbus. And the funny thing is I said this in the last video, or not the last video, but the history of the entire world video by Bill Wirtz. Christopher Columbus was not the first one to reach North America. It was definitely the Vikings. Oh my God.
Columbus landed in Central
Was not
America in
expecting
October
that.
1492, and he had the time of his life. And by that I mean he went on a huge theft and murder spree. He stole gold, jewelry, people, and a hammock. And then he returned to show off all
hammock?
his
I didn't know
riches,
about the
including
hammock.
a few previously undiscovered items such as tobacco, the pineapple, turkeys, and a hammock.
I knew
know
about
what
the
you're
tobacco
thinking,
and
but
people.
Oversimplified, Columbus didn't.
And guess what? He gave them back in return, and so did the colonists. Disease. The Native Americans never saw diseases like that the colonists brought over. Very interesting. What a great gift.
Items such as tobacco, the pineapple, turkeys, and a hammock. Now I know what you're thinking, but oversimplified, Columbus didn't discover America, the Vikings did. And you'd be partially right. In the 11th century, Leif Erikson was the first European to land in America. But hey, if you love Vikings so much,
Happy
then why
Leif
don't
Erikson
you check
Day.
out today's sponsor. Vikings War of Clans is a mobile game that was inspired by
I
the
used to be
famous
so
strategy
addicted to
and
mobile
RPG
games.
of the 90s, like
If
Age of
by
Empires
any
and
any chance you guys
Civilization.
care
Like
about
building
this
cities,
ad,
collecting
I'll
resources,
definitely have
training
it down
armies,
below
joining
this
a clan and
download
going to
links
war,
for it.
then my friends, Vikings War of Clans
It's only
is
fair.
for you. And what
I'm not
makes
gonna
this
skip
world
it.
so addictive is that more than 20 million online players are constantly changing the way the game evolves by never-ending fighting
I used to be
over
addicted
resources,
to
forging new alliances,
More in
and
Order
competing in live events.
and
Support my channel by downloading Vikings for
what's
free,
the other
only
one?
from my links in the
Game of
description
War,
box below,
those two.
and get the special bonus of 200 gold coins and a protective shield. Don't forget to look me up and join my Vikings clan under my nickname, Oversimplified.
I wonder if he actually
Now,
still
where was
plays.
I? Oh yeah, Columbus, time of his life, hammock. And suddenly the
Hammock,
race was
yes,
on to
most
explore
important.
and conquer the new world.
And notice who's already there, the Spaniards. Spain was a very big powerhouse early on when it came to colonizing things like that. As you can see later on, France, England, and the Dutch get here, but the Dutch get kicked out, and so did France actually. But England and French, they really start getting in it later on after they see all the success that Spain had with it. And it's very profitable, and it's going to lead to a huge war.
After a couple centuries of warring with the natives and each other, the European powers had claimed quite a lot of land, including this area, which both the English and the French claimed as theirs. One day the French said, "I'm going to build some forts along here," and the English were like, "Could you not?" And the French said, "Sorry, but no, I could not." And they went ahead and built their forts, which pissed off the English, so they sent an up-and-coming British lieutenant colonel by the name of George Washington with a combined force of British troops and Native Americans. After a short battle, the French commander said, all right, we surrender. Okay, boys, pack it up. They're surrendering. Oh, sorry, was I not meant to split his head open with a tomahawk? Don't worry. It's not like this will start a 7-year-long major global conflict. And what happened next was a 7-year-long major global conflict.
And, you know, just a little foreshadowing is you see how the England hired, or not hired, but got the natives to fight the French. England will also get the natives to fight the colonists later on. They'll also hire mercenaries from other countries and try to get other people involved when fighting the colonists.
start a 7-year-long major global conflict. And what happened next was a 7-year-long major global conflict, which
Both
Great Britain
England
won.
and France
At the peace
went broke.
negotiations, Spain gave up Florida, while France gave up all of its territories in North America. But Britain's victory came at a cost, a £60 million cost. They were now broke, in a lot of debt, and had to come up.
Did a fork just land in that guy's head?
And next was a 7-year-long major global conflict, which Great Britain won. At the peace negotiations, Spain gave up Florida, while France gave up all of its territories in North America.
I don't know
but
why.
Britain's victory came at a cost, a £60 million cost. They were now broke, in a lot of debt, and had to come up with some way to repay it. So they went to the colonies and said, okay, listen up. So a huge part of the war was spent protecting you from the...
I like how OverSimplified can literally just put legs and arms on a country or state, and it looks like... It just looks perfect. Like, it looks perfectly animated.
French, and now we have no money because of it. So... I'm not sure what you're saying here. Okay, so we spent a lot of money protecting you from the French, right? Right. And now we're broke.
Here comes all the taxes.
Listen to me. We spent all of our money protecting you, and now we need money.
And, you know, England is broke, and France is really broke too. And when France comes and helps the colonists, you know, that's what leads to the French Revolution. It's pretty crazy how much of a financial impact this war has and really brings upon everyone else. The colonists don't have a ton of money
pay us back some
either.
Money? No. Okay, we're just going to go ahead and tax you. In 1764, Britain introduced the Sugar Act, forcing the colonists to import sugar and molasses exclusively from the British.
Townshend Act was probably the worst.
Then a year later, they introduced the extremely controversial Stamp Act, and it worked a little something like this. Hello, shopkeep. Hello, Mr. Bungleberry. Here's the deed for your new shack. Stamp. That'll be 3 pence, please. Wait, what was that? It's the new tax. I get a stamp on any paper or documentation I make, and you have to pay for it. Would you like to see this pamphlet that explains everything? Yes, please. Okay. Stamp. 2 pence, please. This is awful. You know what? Just give me a deck of cards so I can go gamble my pain away. Okay.
Oh,
no.
Stamp each card. Stamp them all.
Don't
Stamp them all.
Stamp. Obviously, the colonists were like, hey, my dudes, this...
And the Townshend Act is like this tax sucks, don't get me wrong, but the Townshend Act is where things really get crazy when they start taxing like oil, paper, and tea. You know, Brits need their tea, so tea is an essential. They start taxing essential things and paper and things like that. It gets pretty crazy, and it's quite a lot of money. You know, it may not, you know, taxes nowadays, it's a lot. It may not seem much, but taxes was so much back then, so much, and when you're getting taxed on literally everything, it's crazy.
New tax legislation right here, this is BS. Until now, they had enjoyed relative freedom to rule themselves, and now suddenly Britain was asserting its control. They were especially unhappy because they didn't have any representatives in the parliament that was levying
taxation without representation.
Orators gave fiery speeches. British goods were boycotted, and anyone loyal to the British found
Give me power, give me liberty, or give me death.
Control.
Really wanted power
because they didn't have any representatives in the parliament that was levying taxes on them. So they protested. Orators gave fiery speeches. British goods were boycotted, and anyone loyal to the British found themselves increasingly harassed. The whole thing actually began to take quite a toll on British business, and after just a couple years, the British were forced to repeal the Stamp Act. But we still desperately need money. What should we do?
Tax them
try
again.
Taxing the colonies. Great idea. Wait, didn't we literally just try that and it failed miserably?
Yep.
Man, look at me. I look fabulous. Have you ever seen such a handsome boy? No sirree, Georgie.
That is
no
not
way.
handsome.
You're the handsomest, smartest, most popular king that ever lived.
His
and
lips look
likes you.
like they got bee stung.
Good job. Your Majesty? Oh, you're still here. Get the hell out. So in 1766, the British made a declaration saying, we can do what we want because we're in charge and you can all go suck it. Then they levied a whole bunch of new taxes on the Americans via import duties.
And these taxes, glass, I don't think I mentioned glass. It's funny how that picture brought it to mind. But the crazy part is this will actually lead to the colonists dumping tea out. Never forget the boys. There's some good boys right there, the Sons of Liberty.
We want because we're in charge and you can all go suck it. Then they levied a whole bunch of new taxes on the Americans via import duties. Glass? There's a tax for that. Lead? There's a tax for that.
Lead, I forgot about lead too.
Oil? There's a tax
oil,
for
yes.
That. And once again, the Americans boycotted British goods, British business felt the pinch, and the British had to back down. All right, this is ridiculous. They're my colonies, and I have to be able to assert my control. repeal all the new taxes except for the one on tea, also send 1,000 troops to Boston to take control. Oh, and make the colonists pay for them. And as British troops arrived, the tension in Boston was palpable. You could cut it with a knife, and it was
Boston
all about to come
Massacre.
to a head.
Yeah.
On March 5th, a band of local patriots began heckling a British guard at the customs house. More and more Americans joined in the heckling, while more British troops turned up in support of their comrade. Snowballs were thrown at the British. The snowballs turned to rocks, the rocks to oyster shells. The soldiers, outnumbered, panicked. One thing leads to another, and you can see where this is going. 5 civilians were killed. The Patriot press throughout the colonies declared the Boston Massacre an unwarranted crime.
And this was a big turning point in, and of course other things, because England will eventually start setting fire to cities and doing a lot more craziness to the colonies. But this massacre really showed that England was kind of abusing the colonies, and really set the tone for not only the colonists' ideas, because back then they were really, they wanted, of course some people wanted to be independent, but it really wasn't big. They still wanted to be a part of England. They still wanted everything, but this is what really set the tone, like, hey, maybe we need to be, maybe we need to stray away, and this will set the tone also for other countries looking in on this. And the American Revolution actually sparks a lot of other ideas for revolutions later on.
Committed against the people of Boston by the cruel British, and the anger continued to grow. A British revenue schooner that ran aground in Rhode Island was burned by the locals. When it came to light that the governor of Massachusetts supported the suppression of the colonists, his house was burned by the locals.
I didn't know about this.
The colonists would set their sights on the remaining tax on tea. On December 16, 1773, a band of patriots known as the Sons of Liberty, disguised themselves as Native Americans, marched down to Boston Harbor, boarded a British merchant ship loaded with tea, and in front of thousands of spectators, threw nearly 10,000 pounds worth of tea overboard. The British were disgusted, and they punished Massachusetts.
Quick, drink it. I think it's the tea is worth like millions of dollars, like the equivalent money wise was like millions of dollars. If you guys know the equivalent of the tea cost in nowadays, let me know, because it was quite a lot of money worth of tea. It's not like they just threw a shipment worth of tea. They threw millions and millions of dollars worth of tea.
They dissolved its General Assembly, revoked their charter, and sent 3,000 more troops to occupy the city, meaning Boston and Massachusetts were now essentially under the direct rule of Great Britain. And oh boy, were the people pissed. The other colonies saw what was happening and worried they might be next, so they called a brain trust to decide what to do. 56 delegates from 12 colonies gathered and met in Philadelphia
Continental Congress.
And the roll call read like a who's who of America's finest thinkers. I'm talking lawyers extraordinaire Johnny A and Johnny J, experienced military commander George Washington, businessman, and
it looks like these guys are being introduced to Super Smash Bros. Like, that's what it reminds me of.
Alcoholic beverage Samuel Adams, fiery orator Patty H, guy who married a rich lady Big J Dickinson. And while they weren't present at the first Congress, soon names like James Madison, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and much later Alexander Hamilton would also have time in the Continental Congress. The question now, though, was what to do about the British. After much bitter debate and disagreement, they eventually agreed on an amazing solution. They would simply ask the British to stop. Can you stop? No, it didn't work. Okay, then tell the local militias to stop.
It didn't work. What do we do now? Yeah, this is the turning point, and it gets really crazy. The American Revolution is so interesting to me as someone who is American, but just the whole ideology behind, fighting the people who colonize you. It's just crazy to me.
Start arming and be ready at a minute's notice. And across the colonies, these Minutemen stood ready for the beginning of the American Revolutionary War.
The Minutemen are so interesting as well. If you guys ever played Fallout 4, you could definitely see the similarities in the Minutemen. These Minutemen were like just civilians or normal people that were ready to fight in a minute's notice. That's why they were the Minutemen, come out of, anyone can do it.
Now, having your colonies in open rebellion is one thing. Once
that's
they start arming themselves, that's when it really hits the fan.
Really
so British General Thomas Gage ordered 700
when
troops
the people
from
start fighting,
into the
it's
rebel-controlled Massachusetts countryside to destroy stores of arms and ammunition held by the rebels in Concord. The British set out in the middle of the night. Patriots, including Paul Revere, rode ahead to warn that the British were coming.
The British are coming. The British are coming.
To prepare. The two sides met in Lexington as the sun began to rise. They faced off against each other, and in the confusion, somebody shot first. The shot heard around the world marked the beginning of the American War of Independence. The rebels were outnumbered and had to fall back to Concord as the British split up to search for rebel supplies. However, more and more Patriot rebels kept showing up, and this time it was the British who were outnumbered as more fighting kicked off in Concord. The most professional army in the world was forced to flee back to Boston at the hands of local, poorly trained militiamen. And all along the British route back to Boston, Patriot rebels continued to gather and open fire on the retreating British. When the British reached Boston,
and here, let's go back just to give a little image why I break this down. So the crazy part about it is, one-on-one, the British was just far superior. They're well trained, better equipped, and they could easily take out the colonists. But they were outnumbered because they split up at Concord. And the one thing the British, or the one thing the colonists had over, the Patriots had over Britain, is they knew the land. That was their huge advantage, is knowing knowing the land, so they knew how to shoot and then back up, shoot then back out, shoot then back out. And the crazy part about it is the Britons were still the redcoats. So they're walking across this big trail, open grassland, rivers, and they're walking around some bright ass red coats. So it's like, and then this is still back in the day when they're playing the drums, walking around. So they're just signaling, "Hey, come shoot me, please." And this just leads them to open attacks. And you'll see, even though the bright red and shit like that, these muskets still can't shoot very far. It's not like they're far, but they're still, you could still retaliate. The crazy part about it is, later on, if the Patriots don't have a significant advantage when it comes to having the high ground at Bunker Hill, or strategically positioned in a certain way when it comes to other fights, or just the element of surprise, we're gonna end up losing, because that was our big factor. The British were just far superior.
The retreating British. When the British reached Boston, the rebel militias surrounded them. Boston and the British were now under siege as small land and naval skirmishes continued around the city. And the British would suffer another embarrassing blow, this time in upstate New York. Colonel Benedict Arnold concocted a plan to take the British stronghold Fort Ticonderoga, which held a large amount of guns and ammunition. He set off towards the fort alone, hoping to recruit men along the way, when he came across the Green Mountain Boys, led by Ethan Allen, who, as it turned out, had the exact same plan he did. So they decided to work together. But I'm in charge. No, 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 I'm in charge. No,
big dick competition.
This went on for some time, until the Green Mountain Boys threatened to go home, and Arnold had to concede. The group raided the fort at night while the Redcoats were asleep, and they caught them completely by surprise, taking...
Notice, once again, stealth, completely by surprise, in the middle of the night. That's really where we start shining. Where the Patriots
and all of its munitions.
I'm American, so I'm going to keep saying we.
Wow, great job, Ethan. Very impressive. By the way, what happened to that other guy we sent to take the fort? Who? Benedict Arnold.
Benedict Arnold, the big scumbag. Big scumbag.
What the fuck? Nobody knew what was going on. The colonies were in open rebellion, and for now, they even seemed to be winning. So King George fired General Gage, replaced him with General William Howe, and ordered the rebellion to be put down immediately. Okay, the British are definitely going to retaliate for all of this, so we should probably put together a proper army. First, we need to pick a commander-in-chief, and I think we can all agree that that job should go to the man, the myth, the legend, George Washington. My friends, I am humbled and honored that you would consider me for such an important role. I did not expect for this. All right, you've been showing up in a military uniform every day for the last 10 months. We all know you wanted this, so cut the crap, George. Dude. Uncool. So Washington began his journey up to Boston to take command of the newly established Continental Army, just as the British made their first major attempt to break the siege. They made plans to take the high ground on Bunker Hill, but spies warned the Continentals of the British plans, so they fortified Bunker Hill and set up defensive positions on nearby Breed's Hill. The day of the battle came, and as the British advanced, a barrage of Continental gunfire was opened up on them. Twice they tried to climb the hill, twice they were pushed back.
Notice how another fight we win, but we don't necessarily win, but it is seen as a win for the colonists. Sadly, they had to retreat, but the reason why is because they just ran out of supplies, and it was just tactically better because Britain was slowly making their way up. But it's a battle that appears to be won in American favor, but it required us to have severely high ground advantage, as well as having the intel that they were coming way beforehand. So another fight we win, but we had we already had such a big advantage.
The battle lasted 3 hours until the Continentals finally ran out of ammunition and had to retreat, allowing the British to take the hill. While technically a British victory, they suffered nearly 1,000 casualties to the Continentals' 400. The colonists showed the British that this wasn't just a rebellion, it was war, and they were ready for it.
Oh my god, elephant butt. But us winning right here, the Americans winning, really put Britain on display, saying, "Hey, this is a losable fight," and this is why France will start joining in, the Dutch will start joining in, and even Spain. They all want to get back at Britain because Britain, really was showing to be dominant and laid waste to France and did quite a good conquest over Spain when it came to the wars going on. So they wanted England out of there.
Colonists showed the British that this wasn't just a rebellion, it was war, and they were ready for it. But one thing they weren't sure about was why they were fighting. While some radicals were starting to throw around the I word, most hoped to eventually repair their relationship with Great Britain. So they sent a letter to King George saying, "Hey man, looks like things aren't going your way. Remove the taxes and let's be friends."
What BM? Bad manners. That's like saying GG early in a game.
Ass. Send that to the colonies. Your Majesty,
I see
your
this
handwriting
game's
is terrible.
going bad
Are
for you.
Sure?
Just give up.
Just do it. What does it say? He's gonna lick my... Gross. So for the remainder of the year, small engagements continued to occur around the colonies. The British burned down the towns of Falmouth, Massachusetts and Norfolk, Virginia as revenge for earlier anti-British incidents. These actions played right into the hands of patriot propaganda. Overseas, the British were seen as brutes, and the French and Spanish would soon begin sending supplies to the rebel cause. During this time, there was also minor fighting going on between patriot and loyalist militias in the southern colonies. Benedict Arnold was still on a mission to win some personal glory for himself, so he headed up an attempt to
I hope
invade
they
Canada
show
in a
the
two-pronged
change he
attack.
does.
The Continentals managed to capture some British forts and the city of Montreal, but a harsh snowstorm with some smallpox on the side saw them defeated and pushed back at Quebec City, and they were forced to retreat all the way to Fort Ticonderoga. Speaking of which, remember all those guns and ammunition? Well, this guy's got a plan for what to do with them. He uses oxen to drag 120,000 pounds of artillery for 2 months through the harsh winter, 300 miles all the way to Washington and his Continental Army surrounding Boston. Boom. Washington's got himself some big guns, which is fortunate because up until now his army had been suffering through the cold winter, not knowing when the siege would end. Now they could.
And this winter will play a role later on, and after many defeats, it'll also become mutiny, and George Washington's leadership is kind of seems to be sketchy, and there's a lot of abandonment. A lot of people abandon. A lot of craziness happens, but they prevail, as we know.
Make a move. Washington wanted to launch a full assault on the city, but his junior officers felt the British were too fortified, and to his credit, Washington was great at hearing and taking on board the ideas of others. Instead, the Continentals worked through the night setting the guns up on Dorchester Heights, overlooking the city, and when dawn broke and the British saw the guns, they knew they were toast. Their positions were completely exposed. It was checkmate. They had no choice but to abandon the city. 120 ships carried 9,000 redcoats and 2,000 loyalists away to an unknown fate, and Washington had his first victory of the...
Is there unknown fate Canada? I think they flee to Canada. I may be wrong. Let me know. But like I said, another American win, but with strategic advantage, placing these cannons here and surrounding the entire, the entire city, which requires them to flee. This makes a huge difference.
Redcoats and 2,000 loyalists away to an unknown fate, and Washington had his first victory of the war. Washington then moved his army to New York, knowing that when the British returned, they would probably land there. In the meantime, a friendly-looking old man by the name of Thomas Paine had written and published a pamphlet called Common Sense, in which he advocated for total independence from Great Britain. It spread across the colonies like wildfire, and to this day remains the best-selling title in America. It was read aloud in taverns and meeting halls, and brought the idea of independence into the mainstream. Congress began to seriously consider the idea. Thomas Jefferson was selected to write up an official Declaration of Independence, and he went hard, writing that all men are created equal, with certain inalienable rights, including...
And all men are equal, and all men are created equal. This will become in question later when it comes to slavery and things like that, because all men are created equal, but the founding fathers are for slavery at this point.
life, liberty, and
Or
the
it
pursuit
will
of
be.
happiness. Of course, Jefferson had over 100 slaves, but we don't have to
Exactly.
talk about that. On the 2nd of
We
July,
don't have to
Congress
talk
voted
about that.
unanimously in favor of independence, and John Adams declared that the 2nd of July would go down as the most remembered day in American history.
It's like
Then a couple days later, independence actually came into effect. The United
4th of
States of
July,
America
PogChamp.
was born. There was no turning back now. The Americans tore down a statue of King George in New York and melted him down into 42,000 musket balls. To the British, it was
I didn't know
treason,
about
and if
that.
the king had his way, Washington and all of Congress would be hung. Speaking of the
All
British,
or
guess
nothing
who's
now.
back? The king sent an intimidating force of 130 warships and 25,000 men to New York. Washington knew that taking on the most powerful military in the world wouldn't be easy. The British set up camp on Staten Island as the Americans dug into defensive positions around Brooklyn Heights, waiting for an attack to come. But the British just waited, wearing down their opponent's nerve while building their own strength. At one point, they launched a big, scary artillery.
And waiting was key because, you know, it's very, very one. The Britons have just a superior naval force. The Americans have nothing. The Americans won't be able to fight back navally or with naval forces until the French really show up. And then another crazy part is, yeah, it's wearing down a nerve. But the real another big key factor of why we're doing so good at the beginning, it's very hard to send reinforcements when you're thousands of miles away. So sitting on basically sitting on your hands, that gave Britain's time to reinforce and just gather up, and it's quite a lot. It's just too much for the Americans to handle.
And then said, you know, if I was you right now, I'd probably sue for peace. But Washington told them to shove it. The Americans kept holding out for what was coming, and when they finally hit, they hit hard. 15,000 British troops approached the American position, and the two sides fired on each other in massive rows. But what the Americans didn't realize was they were only fighting a decoy. The main British force was going around to flank the Americans from behind, and when they arrived, they inflicted heavy casualties. The Americans panicked and retreated back to Brooklyn Heights, where they then found themselves trapped between the British army and the river. It looked as though the war was already lost, but luckily, instead of attacking, the British decided to dig in for a siege, and then a thick fog set in, allowing Washington's army to escape across the river unimpeded. The British continued to chase and engage the Americans at Manhattan, and the Americans suffered defeat after defeat after defeat. It was a disaster.
And notice how this isn't when stealth or positioning's in play. It's right when it's one-on-one combat. The Brits were just far superior. And this is when, you know, the luck runs out, and this is where it shows who's the big guy, who's the big boy here.
Washington's army to escape across the river unimpeded. The British continued to chase and engage the Americans at Manhattan, and the Americans suffered defeat after defeat after defeat. It was a disaster. Washington's leadership was called into question, as thousands of American POWs were left to rot as traitors.
And that's where a lot of the usually prisoners of wars are not treated with the most respect, but are usually all right. Like they're all right because you want to trade them back, but they're marked as traitors, which disease and shit killed them. A lot of the deaths and casualties came on the American side just came from all the people captured. It was honestly better to be killed at this point than captured by Britain.
Washington's army fled through New Jersey all the way down to Pennsylvania. Rarely had an army been so badly beaten, yet survived to fight another day.
Well, there you go. Well, I appreciate all the people that came by. If this gets on 50 likes, we'll definitely do part 2, and I'll see you guys next time.